The summer sun was already brutal by late morning on August 23, 1912. The kind of heat that made the swamps around Swayze Lake in rural Louisiana shimmer like mirages. 8-year-old Bobby Dunbar was there with his family, laughing, running along the water's edge. A boy whose world had never stretched farther than the pine forests and fishing boats of the American South. And then somewhere between the excitement of catching frogs and the quiet of the picnic lunch, he vanished. Not a scream, not a splash, just gone. Neighbors scoured the lake with lanterns through the night. Search parties dragged alligator-infested waters. Bloodhounds traced trails that dissolved into nothing. Days passed, then weeks. The Dunbars grew gaunt from sleeplessness, their lives shrinking to the size of a single unanswered question. Where did Bobby go? Newspapers printed his photograph across the country, fueling the panic. Sensational headlines claimed he'd been taken by wild animals. Others accused traveling strangers or vagrants, but the truth was that no one knew anything. And then, months later, in a small Mississippi town, nearly 400 miles away, a ragged boy was spotted traveling with a tinker named William Cantwell Walters. A nervous neighbor claimed she'd overheard the child say he wasn't Walters' son. Police arrested Walters at once, pulling the confused boy away from him as a crowd gathered. The boy cried, insisting he was named Bruce Anderson, and he wanted his mother. But the law didn't care. They wired the Dunbars immediately. When Percy and Leslie Dunbar arrived to see the boy, the standoff between identity and desperation began. The child shrank behind officers at first, wide-eyed, uncertain, as if trying to assemble memories that did not belong to him. But the headlines were already writing themselves. Missing boy found alive. People wanted a miracle. And the Dunbars needed one. By the second day, Leslie Dunbar was hugging him, sobbing, insisting she recognized moles on his foot and the shape of his ear. Photographers recorded the reunion as if witnessing a resurrection. The boy, silent at first, accepted the name they gave him, Bobby, maybe out of fear, maybe confusion. Maybe because adults kept repeating it until it sounded true. Walters, meanwhile, was dragged to jail, shouting that the boy was the son of a woman who worked for his family. He begged them to fetch her. Julia Anderson did arrive, exhausted, poor, and terrified, and insisted the child was hers. But the authorities barely let her speak. It presented the Dunbars as the respectable, grieving parents. And Julia, as an unreliable woman from the wrong side of the tracks, reporters dismissed her instantly. Her tears didn't matter. Her certainty didn't matter. The world had already decided who the boy belonged to. So Bobby Dunbar went home to Opelousas, Louisiana, to parades, cheers, fireworks. Crowds lifted him onto their shoulders, celebrating him like a child returned from the dead. And in those photographs, if you look closely, he seems to be trying to smile the way people wanted him to, trying to fit himself into the outline of a boy he could not remember being. Life carried on. The Dunbars raised him as their own. He learned to hunt in the same woods he had supposedly vanished from. He grew older, taller, quieter. He had birthdays, friends, eventually a job as a repairman. He married, he had children of his own. And every so often, newspapers retold his miraculous story the boy lost. Then found while Walters served 2 years before being released, his life shattered. Julia Anderson died convinced the world had stolen her son. Decades passed until the truth began clawing its way back. It started with a granddaughter, Margaret Dunbar, who grew up hearing the legend of Bobby's disappearance and return. She'd been raised on the version everyone believed, that her grandfather survived an impossible ordeal. But in 1999, a century after the original disappearance, she found herself staring at old court transcripts, yellowed letters and faded photographs that didn't align with the myth. She read Julia Anderson's sworn statements. She read witnesses describing how the boy clung to Walters, refusing to let go. She read accounts claiming the Dunbars initially weren't sure the child was theirs, and the deeper she went, the more the legend unraveled. The Dunbar family didn't want questions. Some thought digging into the past was dishonoring a miracle. Others simply didn't want to face the possibility that the miracle was built on a lie. But Margaret couldn't stop. She wanted the truth, and the truth led her to one brutal, unavoidable conclusion. The identity of the boy returned in 1912 had never been proven, not by evidence, not by logic, not by anything except wishful thinking and the force of public opinion. So she asked the question no one else had dared. What if the boy was not Bobby at all? The timing was perfect for science to step in where memory had failed. DNA testing was now cheap and definitive. And so, 90 years after the disappearance, long after graves had grown moss and the last witnesses had fallen silent, Margaret convinced her father Bobby's only surviving son to take a DNA test. The results were clear, unyielding, absolute. The man who had lived his entire life as Bobby Dunbar was not a Dunbar. The bloodline did not match, not remotely, not in any margin of error. The legend collapsed in one cold printout. The boy found in Mississippi in 1912 had been Bruce Anderson all along, Yulia's child. A child taken from his mother, not by a swamp, not by kidnappers, but by the machinery of a desperate family, hungry newspapers, and a justice system eager for a satisfying ending. A child who grew up believing a story others forced upon him. A child whose real mother had died, heartbroken and disbelieved. Even more chilling, the real Bobby Dunbar, the boy who vanished at the lake, had never been found. Not then, not ever. And for a century, the wrong boy had lived in his place. When the DNA results were revealed to the Dunbar family, reactions fractured. Some were devastated. Some refused to believe the science. Others felt relief finally knowing the truth. Margaret described feeling as though she'd stumbled into a human tragedy hidden inside her family. As proudest legend a tragedy her grandfather never knew he was part of. And somewhere far away, the descendants of Julia Anderson received the quiet vindication she had been denied in life. The world had called her a liar. Time had called her wrong. But the truth, waiting more than 80 years for its turn to speak, proved her right. Today, photographs of Bobby show a man who never knew he carried two lives on his shoulders. One, the life he lived, father, husband, worker. The other, the life stolen from someone else, handed to him by strangers, shaped by a mistake too big to fit inside a headline. And in the shadows of that truth lies an even darker, unsolved mystery. What really happened to the real Bobby Dunbar on that hot August afternoon in 1912? Was he taken? Did he wander too far into the swamp? Did someone see an opportunity in a moment of chaos? The investigation ended the moment the lost boy was found, and so the trail froze in, place with a century of unanswered questions behind it. But the story lives on, not because of the disappearance, and not because of the mistaken identity, but because of what it reveals when the searchlight of truth hits it from the right angle. A family seeking hope, a mother fighting loss, a community craving closure, a boy who drowned under layers of other people's certainty until even he stopped questioning the shape of his own history. And a truth buried so deeply that only science, nearly 100 years later, could drag it back into the light. In the end, the only boy who ever came home was the wrong one, and the one who didn't became a ghost that haunted a century, silently stitching two families together by the absence he left behind. The kind of story that lingers not because it's solved, but because it never was, and because the truth once uncovered forces us to look again at what we think we know about memory justice and the fragile accidental ways a life can be rewritten simply because someone needed it to be. And so the legend of Bobby Dunbar doesn't end with a triumphant return. It ends with a revelation, late in the evening of the 20th century. When the last living threads of the mystery were tested, measured, and compared, when a man's identity, carried for a lifetime, dissolved under the fluorescence of a DNA lab. And in that moment, the world finally learned what the boy himself never did, that he had spent his entire life living under another child's name, while the only person who ever recognized him was the mother he wasn't allowed to return to.